I took the night shift at St. Brigid's because the living had become too loud. The dead kept better hours. They didn't ask for explanations, and I had none worth giving. My name is Michael Harlow, 42, custodian of grass and granite. I mowed between angels' feet, straightened flags, reset plastic flowers after storms. I learned the patience of lichen and the way frost writes its own scripture. Work like that forgave a man for being quiet. The cemetery sat on a low rise above the harbor, a few acres of stone and wind. Pine needles collected in the mouths of lambs carved for children. A maintenance shed leaned into the hill as if listening. I kept a thermos, a coil of twine, a flashlight with a temper, and a toolbox with one squealing hinge I never fixed. You learn which sounds belong to a place. The hinge became one of them. I told people I liked the hours. The truth was, I couldn't sleep when other people slept. I'd lie beside a darkness that knew my name and wait for morning to wash me clean. It never did. On my first night, I put my wife's wristwatch in the drawer of the desk. The crystal was spidered from the accident. The hands were stopped at 3 hours. I kept it because penance needs a clock, even if it refuses to move. Most nights followed a ritual. Midnight rounds with the flashlight, breath pulled thin by salt air. Check the fence along the eastern edge where vandals sometimes tested the chain. Note the new flowers that would wilt by Thursday. Read names the way you read apologies, slowly, as if you could change their meaning by care. In the shack, I'd write a line or two in the logbook, all quiet. I liked how the words looked, small and obedient. People think cemeteries are silent. They're not. Soil settles. Trees talk in their leaves. A fox will use the paths like a parishioner. You begin to hear patterns, a distant buoy, the gravel's soft grinding, the bulb above the door coughing itself awake. I filled the nights with these modest repetitions until the sting behind my ribs dulled into habit. Sometimes I almost believed quiet was the same as forgiveness. Then the watch in the drawer would press against my thoughts, heavy as a coin on the tongue, and the room would feel like a held breath. I told myself it was nothing. Wind, memory, nerves, the kind of unease that follows a man who has learned to sleep beside absence. On those first weeks, I kept the gate keys in my pocket and the logbook open. I wanted a record that said I was here, that I stayed. The lamp flickered above the door, a yellow pulse. The shade rattled when the wind pushed at it, then stilled, like a heartbeat learning restraint. I settled into the chair and listened to the hill. Beyond the stones, the harbor breathed, in and out, as if reminding me of a cadence I had once matched. If the hour held anything unusual, I didn't admit it. The watch was only a keepsake. The cold that gathered near 3 was only weather. The way the trees seemed to bend with my breathing was only coincidence. I wrote the same words in the log and closed the book gently, as if not to wake anyone. I told myself it was only the wind learning my name. The first time it happened, I was sweeping leaves from the path that led to the older graves, the ones no one visited anymore. It was early October, the kind of cold that smells like iron. My breath moved in clouds and the flashlight beam shook just enough to make the stones seem alive. I remember checking my watch. No, her watch. It was 2:57 a.m. I'd looked at it out of habit, though it hadn't worked in years. By the time I reached the gate, something changed. The air went still in that strange, deliberate way, as if the world had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. I heard what I thought was wind moving through the trees, but the sound had rhythm, not random. It came in slow intervals like someone breathing just out of sight. In, pause, out. I stood there for a moment, convincing myself it was the ocean. The tide was close. Sound travels oddly at night. Still, the breath didn't fade. It matched mine. I took a step forward and the gravel answered with a crunch too loud, too present. I felt watched, not by eyes, but by attention. There's a difference. I shone the light along the fence, half expecting to find an animal, a shadow, something rational to hang my fear on. Nothing moved. The world was obedient again. Only my heartbeat seemed real. At 3 a.m. exactly, the maintenance light outside the shed flickered 3 times. It had done that before, but never on the hour. It felt rehearsed. I walked back, half annoyed at my own nerves, half ashamed that I'd noticed. The wind picked up, carrying what sounded like the faint ring of metal on stone, like someone brushing a key against a headstone. The air was colder there, heavy with salt and the faint sweetness of cut grass long gone to rot. Inside the shack, the radio I never used clicked on for half a second. Static, a small sigh, then silence. I froze, waiting for reason to return. Power surge, I told myself. Old wiring, moisture. But the bulb above me swayed slightly, though the air was still. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar. Paler, thinner, as if the light refused to sit on me. I opened the drawer where the watch slept. For the first time since I'd kept it there, it was warm to the touch. I held it in my palm, feeling the faintest vibration beneath the cracked glass. The hands hadn't moved, but I swear I heard the tick inside my head. Soft, steady, alive. Something passed through the room then. A pressure, subtle but precise, like the pause between a question and its answer. It left a taste of metal in my mouth. When I exhaled, I realized I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I wrote in the logbook, trying to steady my hand. Unusual sound near north fence. Checked. Nothing there. I added, almost as an afterthought, watch felt warm. Then I crossed it out. At dawn, the hill looked innocent again. Grass slick with dew, stone silvered by morning. The kind of beauty that makes you doubt the night entirely. But I knew what I'd heard. The cemetery breathed with me. And for the first time, I wasn't sure who had started it. If stories like this find you when you need them, don't disappear. Subscribe to the channel and stay close. I have more truths to share. After that night, I stopped pretending it was my imagination. Each shift began the same. Clock in, light the lantern, walk the rows. But something had changed in the air. The silence felt aware. It didn't just fill the space, it waited. I began to time it, out of habit or fear, I don't know. Always around 3 a.m., the world would narrow to a single sound. That faint, steady breathing that followed mine like an echo learning its rhythm. I tried to fight routine with reason. I cleaned the shed twice a night, tightened every screw, replaced the bulb that flickered, rewired the outlet where the radio had hissed. Yet no matter what I fixed, something found a way to remind me that the hour belonged to it. Once, I left the shed door open to prove it wasn't superstition. Wind, maybe, or pressure shifts. But when I returned, the door was closed, the latch carefully set, as if by someone who'd been taught to be quiet. I started dreaming on my feet. At least it felt like dreaming. Shadows moved in patterns that made sense only to the guilty. The beam of my flashlight would catch a shimmer at the edge of a headstone, a shape gone before my brain named it. Sometimes I heard my name in the wind. Michael. Faint as memory, but precise enough to stop my breathing. The worst part was the voice that began to form inside the breathing. Not words at first, just a hum, soft and low, like someone remembering a tune they used to love. Then one night it spoke. You stayed. Only that. I turned so fast I nearly fell over a marker. There was no one, just the open field, the black pines trembling as if in laughter. The watch became my tormentor. Each night at 3s it would pulse faintly in my hand, never ticking, but alive. The warmth felt almost human, like skin that refused to die. I tried locking it in a toolbox, but the heartbeat still reached me through the metal. I began to think it wasn't the watch that was keeping time. It was the hour keeping me. Memory started to bleed into waking life. I'd hear the crunch of gravel behind me and see her face in my mind. The flash of the headlights, the last moment before impact. The sound that followed wasn't a scream. It was the sound of breath leaving. That same slow rhythm. In, pause, out. I'd buried it beneath work and silence, but now the ground was giving it back. One night I found footprints near the northern fence, bare, small, leading nowhere. I followed them with the light until they faded into mist. When I turned back, the gate had closed behind me. I remember whispering her name, not out of love, but apology. The air around me tightened, like the world was listening. Then came the whisper again, close to my ear this time. You stayed. I wanted to answer, but guilt has a way of sealing the mouth. Instead, I walked back to the shed and sat in the dark, the watch on the desk between my hands. Its cracked face reflected the faint bulb above, splitting the light like a wound. The sound of breathing surrounded me. My own, hers, The cemeteries, all indistinguishable. By dawn I'd written nothing in the logbook, just left the pen uncapped, ink pooling on the page like something alive. If this story touched something inside you, leave a like. Not for me, but for the next person who's looking for a reason to stay. It was the third week when I stopped pretending to work. I only moved through the motions, sweeping the same path, checking locks that didn't need checking, pretending I didn't hear what waited for me. The cemetery had become a language, and I was finally starting to understand it. Every creak of the shed, every shift of wind through the trees, they weren't sounds anymore. They were sentences, and all of them were saying the same thing: tell the truth. That night the mist came early, heavy and low, swallowing my flashlight beam until it looked like I was walking inside a throat. I carried her watch in my pocket, its weight growing warmer with each step. The air around 3:00 a.m. had its own texture now, thick, electric, expectant. Even the birds knew better than to sing then. When the hour came, the light outside the shed flickered once, then died completely. The world went gray and depthless. I felt the ground breathe beneath me. From somewhere beyond the gate came a sound. Not wind, not voice, but something between remembering and warning. It said my name again, softer this time, like a confession. I walked toward it, drawn by something older than fear. The fog opened in slow ribbons, revealing the old section, the graves no one visited, the ones that faced the sea. I stopped at the place I'd avoided since my first week. A single stone, plain, half-tilted by years of frost. Her name carved shallowly across it. Anna Harlow. The date. The same night I stopped living. The air held still as a held breath. I knelt and placed the watch on the soil. It pulsed once beneath my fingers, as if grateful to be home. And then I heard it, not outside me, but inside. The same voice that had followed me through every shadow. You were supposed to stop, it said. I saw it then, the truth I'd buried deeper than her. The accident wasn't chance. I had been drinking. Not much, but enough. She'd begged me to let her drive. I told her I was fine. When the headlights came around that curve, I'd closed my eyes instead of steering. For 1 second, one heartbeat. And that heartbeat had followed me here, every night since. The sound rose around me, the breathing, the whisper, the hum of all the unspoken things I'd tried to outlast. It wasn't her haunting me. It was me, replaying the moment that never stopped. The cemetery didn't create it. It only gave it a place to live. I pressed my palm to the ground and said the words I'd refused to say aloud. It was my fault. The wind moved through the trees like an exhale. The air loosened, light returning in cautious breaths. The bulb above the shed flickered back to life, steady this time. I waited for a voice, a sign, some acknowledgement from the dark. But there was only quiet. Not silence as punishment, but silence as acceptance. The watch lay still now, cold, the hands forever at 3:00. I left it there. Some things are meant to stay buried, not to forget them, but to let them rest. I walked back to the shack, each step lighter and heavier at once. The logbook waited open on the desk. I wrote one line. All quiet, finally. It's been 9 years since that night. I don't work at Bridget's anymore. The new caretaker keeps the grass neater than I ever did, and sometimes when I visit, I see him standing by the shed with the same tired posture I used to have, one shoulder lower than the other, as if the weight of silence has its own gravity. I never tell him what I heard there. Some truths don't belong to anyone else. I moved inland to a smaller town where the sea can't reach me. I work at a library now. Mornings. People talk there, gently, the way the living should. I shelve books, fix torn pages, listen to the soft murmur of thought around me. You'd think that would be peace, but peace is never permanent. It just changes shape. There are nights when I wake at exactly 3 a.m. I'll sit up, half expecting to see the fog seeping through the window, or hear that slow, measured breathing that once echoed mine. But all I find is quiet. Not the old kind, not the kind that accused, but something closer to stillness, the kind that listens without demanding. I've learned the difference. I still dream of her sometimes. Not the crash, not the moment everything stopped, but before. The sound of her humming beside me, a tune she used to make up when we drove through long stretches of road. I never recognized the melody until I heard it in the wind that night at the cemetery. It wasn't haunting me. It was reminding me. The dead don't want our guilt. They want our honesty. I visit her grave once a year on the anniversary. The soil has sunk a little, the grass grows uneven, and the headstone still leans. I never fix it. It feels right that it's tilted, like something that bowed and stayed humble. I bring no flowers, only a small thermos of coffee and an apology I keep rewriting inside my head. The watch is still there beneath the earth, frozen at the hour I finally listened. I imagine it doesn't tick anymore, but sometimes if I stand quietly enough, I feel a faint vibration beneath my shoes. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's the ground breathing again. I used to believe I worked among the dead to escape the living. Now I know it was the opposite. The dead never haunted me. They only held up a mirror until I could see myself clearly enough to stop running. The living haunt themselves with what they refuse to remember. People ask sometimes why I look so calm when I speak of loss. I tell them calm isn't peace, it's surrender. There's a point where pain stops fighting you and just sits beside you like an old friend. You pour it a cup of coffee and you both watch the horizon without speaking. I keep the logbook from my time at St. Bridget's. The last entry is still there in fading ink, all quiet, finally. I used to think it meant the haunting was over. Now I think it meant I'd begun to understand the silence, not as an enemy, but as the only witness left. Sometimes, when the night is thin and the wind presses against the window like a slow breath, I whisper her name into the dark, not to summon anything, not to ask forgiveness, but to remind the world I'm still here, listening. And in that small moment, between one breath and the next, the quiet feels almost alive again. It never followed me home. It was already here. If stories like this find you when you need them, don't disappear. Subscribe to the channel and stay close. I have more truths to share.